Okay, hello everyone. My name is Bill Jeter, and I'm an artist currently based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been working for close to 60 years now in works, different kinds of artwork, everything from different types of photography, clay, ceramics, painting, drawing, any kind of visual kind of thinking artist you can name. But more importantly, my life has been kind of evolved and around art. I remember being in kindergarten, and the very first time the teacher said, if everybody's good in the class, one by one, you could put on your dad's paint shirt and you could go up to the easel and you could paint a painting. I was 5 years old then, and I never looked back from there. It was just, I couldn't believe that they would actually let you do something like that they would let you actually paint and you could make it. And then when you're all done with it, you can take it home. And if you don't like it, you can come back the next time and do something different. That seemed like heaven to me. So she could get me to be a good kid as long as she let me go to the paint easel. So that was my introduction. That's like 60 years ago. Other than that, I mean, I've worked in art all over the place, including in other countries. I've done work with people who have been very much beginners. I've also worked with very advanced people and met a lot of people in between. How do we get involved in art, or how did I? I think it was always there. Art was always something that I gravitated to, not because I necessarily loved painting and drawing, but because I was always trying to find other ways to ask questions and find answers to things that I had a lot of concerns or a lot of experiences about. Um, for me, art's a way to figure out how to, and when I say how to, I mean how to formulate things, how to ask things, how to see the world around you in different ways. And on its highest level, I see it as a calling that becomes a way of thinking about the world. I try to think in a very creative way in everything that I do, even if it's stacking things or figuring out how to not be involved in certain kinds of activities. All those kind of things, I try to be very creative in how I do it. In order to do that, I find myself being as much of a scientist as I am an artist. I love ideas about mathematics. I love ideas about chemistry and physics, particularly. And I'm drawn to a lot of variations in how we see the world. It's led me to think about things about dimensionality and things that have to do with the way light forms, the way we function, something about our individuality as people and as particles and as beings. And I think art gives me the broadest context on how to explore some of those things. Sometimes it seems a little heady, but sometimes it's just getting my hands dirty and figuring out how to make a piece of wood do what I think it needs to do for the idea that I'm trying to present. I've had a lot of experience working in different forms, including some pretty heavy duty things like heavy metals and melting bronze and crafting things with wax and sculpture, but also working with people who are trying to figure out ways to be therapeutic with art, having art help them to understand the world, to learn how to actually work with their hands because they had an injury, or they have some ideas about how to take the vision that they have left and to enhance it so that they can become better at reading or seeing. My first major mentor in art convinced me of one thing, and he said that the reason that many people are not artists isn't because they can't see, it's because they really don't look. And he convinced me that there was this thing called observation, that in order to discover something, you had to observe it. And in order to observe it, you had to really look at it. My first drawing class in college, the teacher put an apple on the table, told us to get out our pencils, and then he told us to start writing. And we wrote for about 45 minutes about this one apple. And the apple was everything you could see about an apple. After the first 2 minutes, I ran out of things to think about. And then I look up and I got, 45 minutes left. So then I start really, really looking at it. And then I realized there were things about the apple that I'd never seen before. And so I start to look at the world that way. And if you look close enough, if you observe enough, and you look into places where other people don't look, or are you're not used to looking, or haven't looked 2 times or 3 times, you'll see things and become aware of things that we generally are not. And that's a training scenario. It's an ongoing thing. It's something that you're always trying to do, something you're always trying to fix, something you're always trying to enhance and make better. My teaching career is tied in with my artistic development and also the passion that I have for learning. And I would have a hard time having been a teacher at all if the only thing I wanted to do was teach poor children how to draw better or be better at making something. For me, it was how can I learn a little bit of something that's going to enhance the way I want to think about the world through these people who see it with fresh eyes. And one of the things I always loved about teaching was I always got to see, no matter how young the person was, or in some cases how old they were, because I've worked with very advanced senior citizens too, that there is a world of difference that I could always learn something from and visualize. An experience to kind of galvanize that was when I once did a residency in the Minneapolis State Academy for the Blind. And I'm a visual artist with 2 degrees, but at the same time, I'm in a school working with blind kids. And some of them were totally blind, lights out, could not see any light at all, and some had variations. And one of the students asked me if I was someone who was sighted and I could see, and they could not see. They wanted to know if I could see everything. And I said, no, if something's in front of something, then I can't see it. And they didn't understand that concept because to them, if you could see, they couldn't see why you couldn't see everything. And so this idea of degrees of vision and what it means, some of the most profound things I've learned from people who don't have it. So I always try to be keen and open to seeing things in that way. How can I learn something about something I take for granted? And as I went around their school, I saw so many differences. We're walking down the hallway and a kid passes by and they say to the, oh, hi, so and so, and they call the friend's name. And I said, well, how do you know that that's them? And the little girls told me because that's how they sound when they come down the hallway. And I noticed everybody on their walking staffs and canes were individualized. They had different trinkets. They had different little rattles. They had all kinds of things on their things. So when kids came down the hallway, they knew that these other friends of theirs and other children were all around them. And I hadn't thought of that. I had heard the sounds and it just disconnected them, didn't think about anything about it. But they had a whole communication system with these sounds that I didn't even realize. So how can I incorporate that some of that kind of strategy into my way of thinking about the visual world? So things like that. I'm always looking to try to figure out and learn things about the phenomena that we are experiencing through our own senses and how it's altered depending on the pathways we have to look at it through. And what would happen if we had super senses that we don't have? What would it look like? So those are some of the influences for me. They've always been things that are outside of this idea that I just want to make a better drawing. I do enjoy drawing and painting and making things and making them in some way resemble or in some cases respond to things that I think are important. But at the same time, I'm much more interested in the how-to part and how things actually function and how people perceive the things and how they function. An African American history course, and this was in 1970. And in the course, we got the course because we had sit-ins in our school. So because we wanted to have instructors who were African American, and we were a progressive enough school where after the sit-ins, they hired some teachers, and one of them was an African American man from Lincoln University. His name was Leon Sneed, and he was the one that was the first person to ever introduce me to Black American history. And it was a mind opener. Many of us who took that course, once they found out Mr. Sneed expected you to work, they were not interested anymore because they wanted to just, kind of hang out. But it just seems to be, by the end, there were a core group of us who really made this journey, and it was a very eye-opening about what could be and how and where. And some of those ideas I still take with me. So that's the power of teaching. Once again, my life has been very much intertwined with people who've come across and done things in that nature. The very first person to ever give me a book about art was a white man, and he was a professor that I had in undergraduate, and he gave me a book about contemporary South African graphics, and they were all black artists, many of them Zulu from South Africa. And he gave that to me, and he says, you really need this, you have to have it, and he gave it to me. And I since had got to actually meet at least one of the artists from that, and then also to actually own one of the prints that one of them had done. And somewhere I think I still have that print. But the point I make is that in many ways you really don't know how you're going to be enhanced, and you can't discount like who's going to be. I would not think that a blind student would be able to help me with my art, but I know that that happened. I would not think that some white guy would be able to introduce me to African art in some way that would be meaningful to me, but it happened. And so you have to also remain vigilantly open, is what I say. You've got to be open to possibilities if you're really serious about it, art. You can stay in your capsule and you can make the same thing, but if you really want to extend through that, you gotta step outside. Um, okay. My name is Bill Jeter, and I'm one of the visual artists here at Homewood Studios. I'm going to do what's called a spontaneous art activity here. What I've decided to do is something that reflects from when I was a teacher. When I was a teacher, students used to self-admit to the school I taught at. And one of the exercises they had to do was they had to do something called a spontaneous activity. They had to take a bunch of random things, no matter what it is, and then they had to put it together in some kind of personal way that showed some reflection of how creative they were, but also, more importantly, how they organized things and how they constructed different ideas. We used to give ourselves 10 minutes to do this. I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to give myself no more than 15. So I'm going to take the materials that are in here, describe a little bit about what they are and how I came about them, and then just try to construct them a little bit. At the same time, maybe make some comments about some of the objects that are here and kind of how they came to be. My process in thinking about art is that it tends to be pretty broad. Sometimes it's very sculptural, meaning that it has elements of form, 3D stuff, and things like that. Sometimes it's very linear and it has ideas that talk about drawing and other kinds of things like that. Um, as we work along here, I've got some scrap boards, a collection of looks like containers, donated containers, pieces of foam and fiberglass, um, pieces of styrofoam, these very unique little uh, ideas and images related to, looks like they've been laser cut, stars and other shapes, and also a collection of found objects. These pieces of wood are not black, they're not charcoal, they haven't been burned, but they're remnants and pieces from things that I've constructed. In this particular case, this is pieces of ebony. So this is a wood that's from Africa, and it is actually a wood that I've used in several other kind of projects. By standards that I know is really expensive to come by to get. So whenever I do use it, even the little tiny little pieces, I always save them. I never get rid of any of it. So sometimes it's things like that. Sometimes they're kind of fastener things. These are just fasteners. Sometimes things are really planned that I do. Sometimes they are not planned. Sometimes they are things that are spontaneous. You get a notion or you get a feeling about how something should go. Usually, when I work with people, specifically with kids, and I'll ask them after they've done something that I think is really creative or in some way really directed, and I'll ask them how they do that. How did you come by to do that? And they'll make a remark, and the remark could usually be like, "Oh, I don't know. It just seemed like it should go that way." And sometimes that's the case. You can't really explain how and why it happens, but sometimes it just seems like it should go that way. And in this kind of exercise, as I do this, it feels calming. It feels like I'm making something that's progressive. What it is, I don't know. I have no idea. Did I do know that now I'm kind of tired of that thing? So I just put that aside. I look at the table. There is something else that grabs my mind, grabs my interest. For some reason, oop, this is something a little different. This is a type of wood from another project. This is called rosewood. Or is it? Yep. This is a rosewood. It's a kind of a reddish wood. And these are remnants from things that I put together and formed and made. Two more pieces. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Let's see. A lot of this kind of process is not just looking, but you have to be motivated to pick it up. You got to be motivated to look at it from different viewpoints. You got to be looking at it from different possibilities of what could happen with it. And a lot of times it's not just linear. Another piece of ebony. Something about the roundness of that shape intrigues me enough to make me want to combine it with this. What goes through your mind? What goes through my mind when I'm doing something like this? Thinking about things from the past. What am I going to be doing tomorrow? I just saw something fly past the window. It could be any kind of number of things. Then I start to become a little bit more maybe progressive in how I see this going. Or I start thinking about other ways that I could enhance this. Okay. 30 seconds countdown. I think that's it. Wheel of Tomorrow.